Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building. First
Yes,
time
indeed.
I'm meeting him. I wasn't here the first time he stopped through.
Oh, you wasn't?
No. But we have Mayor Pete. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Welcome
Thanks for
back,
having me.
I should say.
Good to be back.
Yeah, a lot more money in your treasure chest nowadays.
Yeah, things have changed a little bit.
Since the
we were
first
here
time
last
you came.
Yeah.
How much have you raised so far?
Last quarter we did, I think, 23 million, something like
Wow.
What? That's a lot of money. But it doesn't reflect in, like, I guess, your polls, the percentages of people who would vote for you.
that. That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's going to take a while to lock a lot of people down, right? So
Yeah.
what we've done now, we've overtaken about 20 of my competitors. Now we got the bigger hills to climb, but we've positioned ourselves in the top tier. And now I think these months between, look, a lot of people won't make up their minds until the last 5 or 10 days, but the window between now and then is when you're doing the ground game, the organizing. We're opening 20 offices in 20 days in Iowa. We're doing about a dozen in New Hampshire over the next few days. That you start putting that organization in place that actually helps you earn it. And that's what the money is for. That, and of course, you got to get the word out on TV and the rest of it. So, we're still raising funds, but now it's about actually putting them into the ground and making them work.
I was reading an article in The Economist. They said they feel like you're losing momentum. Do you feel like that?
No, I think we're all right. I mean, look, when we came in, we went from 0 to where we are now
Absolutely.
at warp speed. I mean, when we started in January, I got to double check that this is true, but I'm pretty sure it's true that I had fewer followers online then than our dogs have now. We had, I think, 4 people on the staff. And nobody knew. I mean, we had a campaign operation the size of a state legislative race somewhere. So there's no way we were going to keep up the speed of our initial arrival.
Mm-hmm.
But it is true that we got to get from where we are now to actually the top of the heap, right? And that's the work that I've got to do, reaching out to different voters, building out the organization I was talking about, keeping the message up, and also being there as some of the others start to decide to step away.
So that was the plan from the beginning, to take out some of the smaller candidates first, and then from there start going to the bigger candidates?
Well, to be honest, we grew further faster than we were planning for. So the other thing we had to do is catch up with ourselves. I mean, we're now in the hundreds in terms of the numbers of people we've got in our organization, and it happened just like that. The thing with having so many other Democrats running is, if it's a 2-way race or a 3-way race, you think about the others and you key off what they're doing.
Right.
When there's 20 of us, you can't even make sense of what everybody else is doing. It's impossible to keep track. So we are looking for that race to kind of thin out, but that's not really something we cause. It's not something we create. Other people decide to step away, and I think the number gets more manageable. And then a lot of folks, I think, who now are saying, I just don't have time to learn what all of you are saying and who all of you are. They're going to wait until it's a more manageable number, too.
Did you honestly think that you were going to get this far? Because I know a lot of candidates come in and they say, I'll just throw my hat in and see what happens. Did you honestly say, this is where I think I'm going to go, and I think I'm going to get to this level? It was one of those things that's like, let's try it and see what happens.
No, I mean, I don't think the presidency is something you should run for unless you mean business.
Donald Trump did.
Yeah,
I don't think he thought he was going to get this far.
I think that's actually true. I think it's like the dog is chasing the car and then actually catches it, right? And I think that's part of why the country is where it is. But no, I mean, we got in. Look, I understood what the odds were. I knew this was going to be uphill, but we thought, we can do this. And then the question is it just me? Is it just us, or do other people agree? What we're finding is there's a good number of people who think this is the right way forward. But we got to get from here to an actual majority. That's the work of the next weeks and months.
Do you think you sucked in the first couple of debates?
No, I thought we were good. Do you?
You kind of got lost, man, Pete. Like, I like you because you're charismatic. I didn't really get that from the first couple of debates.
Well, I mean, part of the debate format is they got you giving 60-second answers. There's 10 of you up there, and it's hard to have the meaningful conversation like we can do in the town halls. Town halls are good for us. Interviews are good for us because you can dig in.
The Breakfast Club is.
Obviously.
Yeah.
No, I mean, really, we can dig in and talk about something in some depth, right? Harder to do that into the debates. And the pressure is to just get out there and knife each other, right? And that's what I think on some level, that's what I think the networks want you to do.
I think people want to see that, too. They want to see the knifing.
Yeah, but we're not there to entertain people.
You're right.
Now, it is fair game to bring out the contrast. So I think, we're going to be talking more and more about the differences between what I'm putting forward and what the others are. But I'm not going to do like a canned, made-for-TV moment in order to, be the talk of the town that night, and then a few weeks later, everybody's forgotten about it. I want to make sure that everything
Senator Harris shot?
No. I'm just saying this is the pressure that you come under
Where'd you get that from?
when you're getting ready to go on. It was in the last debate too. They were saying like the moderates versus the left, making it look like a boxing match, right? And I get that, but I think you've got to be about yourself, and the most important thing I think is for somebody watching the debate to be able to picture how their life is going to be different if you're president versus any of the others. And that gets lost.
You know what? That's interesting. You said that you're not there to entertain people, but hasn't Trump kind of changed that? Like, I feel like the language of politics is dead. I feel like you do have to entertain.
But
to get
that's the
people's
problem,
attention.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
the White House is being run as a reality show, and
Yeah.
we're paying the price because it turns out we need the president to be a president. Like, we need the White House to run the country and to help run the world. And when you don't have that, yeah, it gets, he's all about the ratings, right? He's getting the eyeballs. And, anytime there's something grotesque, it's very hard to look away from. So for that reason alone, everybody's fixated on it. But it's also exhausting. It's weakening the country. It's making us worse off. We're divided. And we can't go on like that.
Now, the other night, I seen that you were at dinner with Desus Mero and Charlemagne. What was that
And my
conversation?
guy, Tommy Alter. I didn't get to stay long, though.
So what was that conversation about, and who paid that dinner?
No, that's a good
Oh, I
question.
definitely left before the bill. I was out.
That sounds like something you do.
Who did pay? That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Oh,
I
clearly Man Pete did.
I did not.
You got to die. I'm out.
No, it was good conversations. These guys are super smart, and we're talking about where things are headed, what the kind of where the political conversation is unfolding. Mero was a little distracted by the fantasy draft that was going on, but so there's a lot of multitasking going on at the table too. But I thought it was a good chance to talk about how we can have a conversation that's meaningful when there's all of this kind of all-consuming show going on.
They say you struggle with black voters. They say it's for a number of reasons. I've seen black people question your record as mayor of South Bend, Indiana. I think I'm reading it now. I said in South Bend, African Americans do worse than whites in the city, in school and college, and they suffer high rates of unemployment and poverty. And they say, as mayor, you haven't focused on addressing those problems. Like, why didn't you put that focus on those things?
Well, first of all, it's absolutely true that the numbers demonstrate that in South Bend, just like in the country, it is a worse experience for black residents. You look at employment, you look at housing, you look at health, and it is worse. But it's not true that we accept that or that I haven't done anything about it. The very first thing we did was work on neighborhoods where there was a lot of blight. We had collapsing houses, making it harder to live in what were mostly black neighborhoods, and we brought resources to do something about that. We've been working to make sure that we support home repair. We've been working on community-oriented approaches to policing. Policing has been a huge challenge for us. It's been a huge racial challenge for us. Very divided. Right now, we're dealing with an officer shooting that happened over the summer that we're still waiting on the investigation. I called for an outside investigation that's running its course now.
He didn't have his body camera on, right?
Exactly, yeah. And, when we have body cameras in the department, but it's not activated, in some ways that makes it even worse, right? Because everybody's asking, okay, why not? And that's part of what's being investigated right now. Look, a mayor's not going to solve these issues overnight, but that doesn't mean we don't work on them. And so if the test is, did you fix racism and poverty and crime? Of course not. But if the test is, did we work on these things and get somewhere, then I believe we have a lot to talk about in terms of how we've handled this in South Bend. And, what we're finding, sometimes the media talks about the black voter like it's some guy, like it's one person with one opinion. You will find voters in South Bend who support me, who oppose me, who support me on housing but don't think I got it right on policing, or vice versa, because there's a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions. And I think it's my job to communicate all of that. But if I want to earn and deserve to earn black support, then I've got to, first of all, talk about what we got right in South Bend, what we got wrong, and what we learned from it. But also what we're going to do for the country. It's why we've got the Douglas Plan, which is, I believe, the most ambitious and comprehensive plan of any of the 2020 candidates.
I haven't seen anybody with a black agenda like to that extent,
right,
except for you.
Right, and we know if only because I'm the white candidate who's going to get asked the most about race, I see that as an opportunity to talk about what we've got to do. But frankly, not just for black audiences. Obviously, anytime I'm speaking to a mostly black room full of voters, they're going to want to know what's your black agenda. But frankly, this is a conversation that needs to happen with white voters, because I think for a lot of white voters, it's been like anything related to race is a specialty issue. Like, you only talk about it when you're with minority voters. Mm-hmm. But this is something that doesn't get fixed unless there's a different level of understanding among white people and white voters. I've come to some of these understandings the hard way, right? As a mayor of a city that's 45% non-white and that's gone through some really brutal issues when it comes to race. Not saying that I understand the black experience, but I'm saying that I understand a thing or two about how all of us are living in a racialized moment in a racialized country. And I think, frankly, part of what's happened in the Trump moment is it has wakened up a lot of people, including a lot of white progressives, to the fact that some things that have been here all along, and frankly, some folks could have told us this all along, but have been brought to the surface where they were under the surface. So I think that we got to talk about how when you take a racist policy or racist system and you try to replace it with a neutral one, that's not enough, because a lot of the inequalities we're dealing with, they're here for a reason, and they were brought to us intentionally. Housing discrimination is a good example.
It's all systemic. So being that this country systemically did things to put black people in this country, has to systemically do something to get them out.
Exactly. I mean, look, when you break something, you got to fix it. Mm-hmm. And some of these harms don't go away on their own because they compound. It's like compound interest. You have money in the bank, it grows over time. The same for a dollar saved is true of a dollar stolen. So when you have generational theft, as has happened in this country for a very long time, we got to be intentional about that. And it's systemic in the sense that health is related to economic empowerment, and economic empowerment is related to education. All of these things are related to housing. And so the other thing we're doing very intentionally is we have a lot to say about criminal justice reform, cutting incarceration by 50%, making sure we have the right tools for supporting police accountability. But we can't reduce the black experience in this country just to encounters with criminal justice. I want to be talking about entrepreneurship. I want to be talking about how we increase the number of black entrepreneurs creating jobs in this country. It's why we set a 25% goal for the federal government to do its purchasing with businesses run by people who've been historically excluded. It's why we want to make sure it's easier to get credit. It's why we want to make sure that the federal dollars are being used to co-invest with promising startups. Because we've got to talk about solutions in the same way that we're talking about problems.
I know, like, even next week, I know they're doing a caucus on helping minorities get homes and helping them with low to no money down, low interest rates, and being able to get their loans. So how can we help more minorities, especially black people, be able to be homeowners? You know, a lot of us have never owned a home, rented 30 years of our lives because they feel like they can't, or they just don't have the money to put down.
Exactly. And renting often is more expensive, right? In our city, it's definitely the case that renting overall costs more money than the mortgage would cost if you could get a loan and get a house. But a lot of people are trapped in that. Right. We talk about income gaps, but you look at the wealth gap, and that's an even bigger issue racially in this country. And most Americans have a lot of our wealth in our homes. So in the Douglas Plan, we propose a kind of 21st century Homestead Act. And the idea is that we make it possible to acquire properties, especially in areas where there have been a lot of abandoned properties or properties that are about to be bought up because we've got a lot of gentrifying going on, and make sure we put those properties in the hands of people who have lived in historically redlined areas and let them build the wealth in the equity in the home. We also know there's issues around credit scoring. Like, a lot of the credit scoring systems show evidence of bias. And frankly, as we get into more and more technology, making decisions from credit to, we're increasingly looking at technology to make decisions about stuff like bail, pretrial incarceration. We got to make sure that these equations aren't basically automating the bias. So whether it's home ownership, credit for business, or other areas, that's going to be a big piece of it.
I also feel like, a lot of times, we're talking to Mayor Pete, by the way, I feel like when people start to make more money, the government taxes them more. And I don't necessarily think that's fair when you have a lot of these big businesses making millions and billions of dollars and they never get taxed.
Well, that's why some people support Trump.
But even with Trump, he doesn't pay taxes, and if he does, it's little to none. But then you have somebody that's finally made it, graduated college. Now they have, they got to pay their college tuition, their college loans. They got to pay if they went, their doctorate, and they got to pay all those loans. So now they're making money. You're taking more money, and then you look at somebody like a company like, let's say, Amazon, and they're paying little to no tax. And it's like, how fair is that?
That's why you vote Trump.
Look, I think
it's the truth, though.
I wouldn't say that.
Like, the rich vote for Trump because they want less taxes, right?
Yeah, but you don't have to be rich. You could just be making it, and they charge you more taxes.
Or I think people like to think of themselves as about to get rich. And so you got the number of people who voted this way compared to the number of people who actually benefited, right, is a big difference. Right? But I think everybody wants to think of themselves in terms of where we're headed. But the issue is, we can raise enough money to do the things we want to do. I mean, I'm not promising quite as much as some of the others, like completely free college and that kind of thing. But we do have some big promises on this.
Is that a Bernie Sanders shot?
I disagree with him on that. Yeah.
So everything is
taking a lot of shots today, man.
No, I'm just trying to make sure you understand the difference between me and some of the others, because it is important to see the differences. And it's not. I'm not going to be a jerk about it. I just think that people need to understand the difference between what we're offering and the others. So I'm not making some of the promises that some of the others are making, but we have a bold agenda for making college more affordable, for delivering more dollars for education. We just talked through a little bit of the Douglas plan, the climate plan that I put out yesterday. This will cost money. So let's be honest about it. In order to get that money, we're going to have to get that from taxes. Does that mean everybody is going to get soaked? No. Does it mean we get it just from rich people? No. Although I do think that wealthy individuals can and should pay more. But to your point, how is it that a company like Amazon makes multiple billions of dollars in profit, billions, and they're paying less you and I paid more in federal income taxes, assuming we paid more than zero last year than they did. So clearly there's something out of whack in the corporate side. And this Trump tax cut, the only thing he's actually delivered on of all of his promises, that he's going to fix immigration, end crime, build the wall and all this, the only thing he actually did that he said he was going to do is this tax cut. You look at it, mostly it's for corporations.
Correct.
When you referenced the Douglas bill, what exactly is the Douglas bill? Like I said, I dig it because it's like you're the only candidate that's presented a real black agenda. What is the Douglas bill?
So it is a comprehensive plan to tackle system. It's named after Frederick Douglass because here you have a figure who challenged America to be closer to what we'd like to think of ourselves are, right? Especially when we talk about the 4th of July and what is the 4th of July supposed to mean to a slave or a former slave. And I think that challenge is at our feet now because our generation is either gonna fix this or we're gonna blow it. And I think that, look, if you think about it, white supremacy is the thing in American, kind of beneath the surface in American life, that has come closest to actually ending America. If you think about the Civil War, I would say that's the closest we've come to America just ending. And that was the force that brought that about. And I think it remains the case that one of the things that runs the greatest risk of ending the American project is systemic racism. So
old white men.
Well, it's all of us. This is the thing, though. It's
started by old white men. They keeping their foot on our necks. Everybody. I mean, men, black people, gay people, women, everybody.
Look, everybody's got to admit that we've got a role in perpetuating a racialized system, and nobody wants to think of that, right? Like there's a lot of people who are genuinely horrified at the idea that they're being called part of the problem, and yet all of us have some part of the problem in us. Certainly, as part of the white experience, a lot of white people don't think that we have a race. We think race is something that applies to people of color.
Yes.
Because we don't have to think about race, right? That's part of being white.
Absolutely. That's the privilege.
And so we got to unpack that in a way that doesn't send people into their defensive corners. I had a conversation with our police department that talked about moving policing out of the shadow of racism. And a lot of them took that as me saying that they were all racist. And it actually made it harder for us to reach out and talk about what the role that we've got to play. So we're having a conversation, I think, across the country about this. But the bottom line is we need policies that will make a difference on the things that are holding people back. And the Douglas plan is systemic. It is housing, health, education, criminal justice, access to democracy. All of these pieces interconnected. You can read about it more online. You go to peaceforamerica.com. You can pull it up. But the point is, it's recognizing that you can't touch one of these pieces without dealing with the other. Every time we talk about race and policing at home, by the end of the hour, we're talking about that, and we're talking about economic disempowerment.
Now, I'm sorry, let me cut you off.
No, it's fine.
I want to ask you a question. When I think about America right now, right?
Envy's Dominican, by the way.
I'm not Dominican. I ask myself, is America ready for a gay president, right? And the reason I ask that is a young man just killed himself for being bullied, for being gay, and you hear all these types of stories, and it's like, when I look at the base of Donald Trump and I see how ignorant a lot of them are, and I was like, with you traveling and going on tours and seeing people, are you able to change what people think or how they look at gay people? Is that a thing where, because I know a lot of times it's so disrespectful, and it's like, but do you need those people to become president? Yeah.
So look, you're not going to get everybody, but most people, I think so. And the way I know is from my own experience at home. So when I came out because I just hit the point in my life where I was like, you know what, I want to start dating, I want to have a love life, and when you're in politics, obviously, like there's no way to do that unless you're out. At least I couldn't figure out a way to do that without being out. So I came out, and inconveniently,
I could have sent you to.
What websites do you know?
No comment.
I'm sure Grindr. You can find somebody that be on the low with you.
But I wasn't ready for that. I didn't want to be looking over my shoulder all the time.
Yeah,
right? So I wanted to date, and I figured, all right, step one, come out. So there was no way to know what the politics of that was. I was already mayor. It was an election year when I kind of hit that point in my life, and I couldn't. It's not like I could run a poll to find out what would happen, right? Like if you knew Mayor Pete was gay, would you still vote for it? Right? Like that would kind of reveal what we were up to. So we just did. I wound up getting reelected in Indiana in a socially conservative community while Mike Pence was the governor of our state. I got 80%. And what that told me was that there are some people who maybe can't get over this, but everybody else is either supportive or they don't care. And all I need is enough people to either be supportive or not care. And I think that's the vast majority of Americans, because elections are about how your life is going to be different. We talk about our own stories and we explain who we are, but at the end of the day, it's not about my life. It's about your life. And it's also why I'm trying to make this election not too much about this president, because I don't think it's about him. I think it's about you. And we got to meet the test of voters saying, okay, am I going to be better off? Am I going to be more likely to pay the bills? Am I going to get a way to have health care? Is education going to work out for me? Am I going to be safe if you're president? And if we can meet that test, I don't think people care about the others. I don't think most people care about the others.
Let's talk about not caring, because I'm one of those people, I don't care who somebody is sleeping with, right? But the other day, I was on The Shop on HBO, and Lil Nas X was on there. You familiar with Lil Nas X?
Yeah.
And Kevin Hart was on there. And Kev is getting some backlash. He's being called homophobic because people think he was being dismissive of Lil Nas X because he said, I don't care. Play the clip for him. Let him hear the clip. I want you to hear the clip. I don't want to.
And with all that early success, you felt it was important to make an announcement recently.
He said it was gay, so what?
Why do you feel it was necessary to come out and say that?
It's not that like it's like being forced. It's just like knowing, like growing up. I'm growing up to hate that.
Hate what?
Homosexuality. So it's like, if for me, the cool dude with the song on top of everything to say this, any other time, like I'm doing this for attention in my eyes. But if you're doing this like while you're at the top, you know it's like for real.
And people think he was being dismissive of Lil Nas X by saying he said he was gay.
Yeah.
So what? Like my question is, if I say I don't care who a man is sleeping with, why is that a problem?
I think it was the fact that he found it necessary to interrupt Lil Nas X and jump in and let everybody know that he doesn't care. Like,
Got you.
Like it's almost like, I don't want to say that I know how this sounds to other people, but I will say that I think a lot of gay people hear that and hear something that might not be that different than what some folks hear when they hear somebody say, I don't see color. Like, no, this is a thing. Like, as much as we might want to believe that our marriages are going to be treated the exact same and we just move through society like everybody else and we're just living our lives, like, no, this is actually a thing. Kids are putting bullets through their heads over this, right? And what's so impressive about what Lil Nas X is doing, I think he actually downplayed it a little bit because he talked about doing this from a position of strength. And that was impressive. He's, this moment when he's blowing up, he decides to do this. But what he was downplaying is that there's a lot to lose, right, by doing that at this moment. Why? Because now he gets to talk about that whether he wanted to or not. Maybe he'd rather be talking about his music. He took that step, and that took a lot of courage. And I think when somebody finds it necessary to wave their arms up and down and jump up and down, telling you how much this isn't a thing for them, it makes you wonder whether they're being honest with themselves.
Ooh, so you find yourself in that position, I guess, like being a candidate. Like, I'm gonna say this. Yeah, I'm gonna put it out there, and
in a way, yeah.
But you said you don't want people to care, though. You said they're either not gonna care.
Well, look, it means different things to different people. I'm not out to be the president of gay America. I'm out to be the president of the United States of America. But it's part of who I am. It's part of my experience. It shapes me. I think it informs the way I come at the world. Part of it is the fact that I'm in a marriage, just not a gay marriage, just a marriage, right? And like everybody else who's married, that's part of how I come at the world. But also, the fact that I belong to a group that's been impacted by hate. Right, does affect the way I understand the world. Now, for most of the time, especially at home, when Chasten and I were figuring out how to be, a couple in South Bend when people didn't know how to deal with this, we found that we could just act like any other couple, invite other people to treat us that way, and for the most part, they did. But we weren't blind to the fact that that was a big deal for other people, even in their own minds, as they were going through the process of treating us like it wasn't a big deal. That might have been a big deal for them. So in the same way that we can't pretend that identities don't exist, we can't pretend this isn't a thing. It's just to make sure we have a way of going through life to where it's not the only thing.
So how do I, as a heterosexual man, handle a situation like that? Because I'm like, I want him to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
and have his conversation.
Yeah.
But I also don't want him to think it's something that he has to talk about. I even said
Right.
that to him. I was like, yo, you don't have to answer these questions if
Right.
you don't want to. I wasn't the one asking the questions.
Yeah.
But I just feel like it just felt weird for them to be putting him on the spot
Yeah.
like that. Young 20-year-old kid just trying to figure it out. Like, why was that the place?
But let me ask you a question. Is that a problem? Because since he did put it out, there's so many questions, and I feel a
Well, I
lot of
wanted to
times.
ask me,
I'm
how do I handle
asking-
it?
I'm asking too.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel funny when we ask questions? Because we honestly, people think that sometimes you're asking as prying, but sometimes it's asking because we don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think we have to talk about it. I mean, we have to go through especially if we're going to trip over something on the way, all the more reason that we ought to talk about it. And, he made a decision to kind of put this out there. I think part of the good that that's going to do in the world is the conversations it's going to launch. So let's have the conversations. We're having trouble talking about things in this country.
So how should we handle it?
I think that's great. Find out if somebody wants to talk about it. It's like anything else in our life. Do we want to talk about? Do I want to talk about being a veteran? Do I want to talk about how I grew up? Do we want to talk about race? Right? Like, why wouldn't we want to get into this? I think where it's a problem is if we define people around it. If I don't think he wants to be the gay
Rapper.
artist.
Right.
I'm not out to be the gay candidate, but I'm not out to run away from it either. And it's not about pretending it's not a thing.
Now, I want to ask you too. We had another candidate up here. I can't remember his name, but he was vet as well, and he talked about the story of him.
Seth Moulton.
And he was
Seth,
overseas, and he seen I think a young child laying there, and he had an opportunity to either pick up the young child or continue on with his platoon, and he decided to leave the young child.
Huh.
What were your thoughts on that? See, I'm a father, so I look at it differently. I'm just curious what your
I didn't
thoughts
hear that interview, but
He talks about that story a lot.
I mean, one of the things about being in uniform, certainly one of the things about being in war, is it puts you. Sometimes it pits you against your own humanity, or you have different responsibilities, and you got to decide what comes first. And I'll learn more about that story, but it sounds like one where he's got an immediate responsibility to his unit and his mission.
He did, yeah.
And his training and his obligation is that overrides something else. But as a human being, that still has an effect on you. Mm-hmm. Now, in a less dramatic way, that's kind of true of public life all the time. Like when you're in a position of authority, and you see it in extreme form with military officers, but anytime you're in a position of authority, you've got to weigh what your office or your command or your responsibility requires of you against what you would do if you were just kind of acting on your own versus acting as an agent, an officer, an employee of the American people. And I think anybody in office has to think about that. And certainly anybody in uniform thinks about that.
I know you're having these climate change panels.
Yeah.
You did yours last night, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Why aren't we having panels about things like election security? When you know that the Russians interfered with the election, when you know it's voter suppression, when you see Mitch McConnell, after getting this intel about the Russians interfering, shut down an election security bill, why aren't we raising more hell about the fact that our democracy is probably dead as we know it? How do we even know our vote will count in 2020? Why aren't they making noise about that the way they are about climate change?
Well, I think part of it is because there's less of a sense of what we're supposed to do about it. Like, as long as the people in charge of protecting us are too embarrassed to admit that there's a problem, right? Because if they admit there's a problem, then they might be admitting they benefited from it. And that's not a road they want to go down.
On
right?
both sides, Republican or?
No, I'm talking about the Republicans.
Okay.
Well, this president in particular. I think a lot of Republicans deep down are horrified by all this, but they can't bring. You can tell, like, this Moscow Mitch thing is one of the few things that actually got to Mitch McConnell, right? Because I think deep down they know that there's something wrong with blocking election security measures, which they're doing, I think, really just to save face. So, yeah, it's a problem. But here's the other thing.
I think they're blocking it because they're benefiting from the Russian interference.
Well, there's that too. But we got to be careful here, right? Because if you and I sit here saying that I mean, it's definitely the case that democracy is under attack, that it's strained and that it's twisted in many ways, it's unfair. But if we sit here saying, look, our democracy is completely broken, you shouldn't even bother, then we're sending out a message saying, don't vote, don't get involved, don't be part of the process, which is exactly what they need to do, right? So we're in this trap where we know there are things being done to make our elections less legitimate, but we cannot participate in the destruction of confidence in our elections, because then nobody votes. Then they definitely win, right? They have more to gain by changing an election by 1% so that a much bigger percentage of ours say, see, it's rigged and stay home.
But ignoring a problem doesn't make it go away.
No question. No,
by
we got to
ignoring
deal with it.
Aren't you kind of putting fuel on a fascist agenda? Because that's part of a fascist agenda, corrupt elections, acting like they're legitimate.
Yes, but also acting like elections are illegitimate. This is the paradox we're in. We got to face up to the fact that there are a bunch of ways that our elections are being warped, right? Yeah, it's Russian interference, but it's also voter suppression, most of which is racially motivated or racially organized. It's the way the districts are drawn, right? I mean, in a very simple, very naked way, you could say that a lot of elections are rigged, not by anything nefarious happening on election day, but just by the way the district itself is shaped to make sure there's this outcome and not that outcome. So we got to name that. More importantly, we got to fix that. And all the while, we got to do that in a way that doesn't discourage people from being part of the process. Because coming to the polls and getting the right people elected, even on a tilted playing field, is the only chance we've got of changing anything.
But Trump is already setting it up to say that the Democrats are receiving outside interference.
Oh yeah, and if
he's setting it up
he
right
loses,
now.
he's going to call the entire legitimacy of the election into doubt. That's
Absolutely.
why our job is to make sure it is not even close. Remember, a guy like this should not be able to get within cheating distance of the Oval Office. It should not be close.
It doesn't make me feel good that the Democrats are banking on a landslide, because I've heard that from a lot of different Democrats. You got to make sure it's not even close. I don't think that's going to happen. When is there ever a landslide in presidential elections?
Landslide is relative, right? I mean,
yeah.
in this country, 55-45 is a landslide. But think about this. 94% of Americans want at least universal background checks, and it's not getting done. Vast majority of Americans want a higher minimum wage, and they're blocking it. Americans want real immigration reform. You know, even that issue where Democrats are sometimes on defense. For the most part, Americans are with us. Issue after issue after issue. There is a big majority for what we propose to do. The question is, what is it going to take for that majority to be reflected in the election outcome?
See, but I understand why people look at the government, look at the president as bullshit. Because you look at everything, all the problems that we have in this country. We've been having these problems forever.
Yes.
And it seems like nothing ever gets fixed. So a lot of people just you look at the gun problems, right? The young man that just, in Texas that went around shooting people.
Yeah.
He tried to buy a gun. He was denied because of his mental health. But then he still bought it privately and still was able to shoot.
Right.
It's embarrassing when you go to other countries, and I travel a lot. And now, when I used to go to other countries, they'd be like, be careful, is this type of warning. But now they're doing that same warning to our country. Like, be careful when you go to the U.S. because of this. Like, that's a problem. But none of these things get fixed. We still haven't fixed the gun laws. It seems like it's all about money. We still haven't fixed a lot of the other things, the mental health problems. We still haven't fixed poverty, especially in our. We still haven't even fixed the water in Michigan. Like, it's like these are things that we feel like
No, and this is part of why I'm running.
fixes.
This is part of why I'm running, because we're having some of the same arguments we've been having for 20 years. This is how I feel about climate too. The problem is not which one of us came up with the best goal in terms of which year we're going to do the power sector versus the vehicle sector. The answer is, how are we going to get anything done?
Correct.
When we've been having the same debate. School shootings, right? I was in high school when Columbine happened. Now we got a second school shooting generation. We're on our way to produce a third. So it's why we need structural reforms. Like, we need to fix the guts of our democracy.
Correct.
And it's why we cannot continue accepting the unacceptable. We just accept that we're the only developed country where people don't all have health care. We just accept that gun violence is going to happen, even though we're the only developed country where it happens all the time. And the question is, how much longer can we go on like that? And I think because it's gone on the entirety of our young lives, we may be beaten down into thinking that it absolutely can't be fixed. But this country is capable of really big things. This country is capable of fixing really big problems. And the question is, will that happen on our watch, or will we just watch this continue to slide down the hill?
We can't even fix the new problems, though. Like, Donald Trump is the newest problem. Like, I understand climate change and all this other stuff, but the biggest threat that America's facing right now is in the White House. And they won't even start impeachment proceedings. They won't even do that. They won't even say that what he's doing is absolutely criminal.
Well, we'll say that it's criminal, but I think nothing's going to happen, right, as long as the Senate is in the hands of those Republicans. So, but is this really a new problem, or is it just the same old problems taking a new form?
A new face. Yeah.
Like, to me, his being in that office is just an expression of everything else being broken. And it's a lot of people who don't even like him saying, you know what, I'm just going to burn the house down and voting for him. Not because they think he's a good guy, just because they want to smash everything. And now that's what we're getting. So this country is capable of incredible failure and incredible success. We got to decide whether we're going to be one of those generations that was alive and in charge when this country did something to make us proud, or whether we're just going to be here when it all goes down the tubes.
I think we're going to be here when it goes down the tube.
No, we can't let that
I'm gonna
happen.
tell you why, 'cause you said
We can't let that happen.
You said there's a reckoning coming.
Yeah.
Right? Over the GOP
Mhm.
and Christianity.
Mhm.
I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person.
Mhm.
But I do believe we are coming to that good versus evil reckoning. And I don't know if there's anything we can do about it. Call it Armageddon. Call it what you want. I don't know.
Look, if this country got through Civil War,
Mhm.
this country got through the struggles of World War II, the fact this country even exists, for all of the deep flaws and problems it has, still represents the fact that human beings can change. I don't believe that the world's cut up into good people and bad people. I think we've all got the ability to do a lot of good and bad things. And I think part of why the presidency matters, besides all the policies and the management, the administration, and the laws, is that the president's the most visible person in the world and can bring things out of us, good things and bad things. And we need presidential leadership that brings out more of the good things, because so much of the struggle is inside of us, just between our appetites and our laziness and our meanness and our ability to sacrifice and to strive and to put really bad habits and evil prejudices behind us. Like, I just think humanity is a mixed bag, and we are neither doomed to failure nor guaranteed to succeed. But the whole point of leadership is to make sure we tip it in the direction of succeeding.
So what's the reckoning between the GOP and Christianity?
Well, GOP's got to deal with the fact that they have come on board with a president that is completely against not just our values but their own. Right? I mean, if you're in Mike Pence's world, where being Christian has a lot to do with a kind of rigid, traditional sexual ethics. Like, that's not how I come at Christianity, but he does. And yet he thinks that this president ought to be the moral as well as political leader of this country. And you got an entire Republican Party coming on board with this, but I think deep down they know that this isn't right. Meanwhile, you got religious traditions that teach us about the importance of lifting up the stranger, the importance of lifting up the poor, of healing the sick. That you go through the New Testament for sure, and every other word that comes out of the mouth of Christ is about things like helping those in need. And you got a Republican Party dedicated to its opposite. There will be a reckoning over that. Now, right now, they hold everybody in line with this one kind of piece of doctrine about abortion, right? Which is obviously a tough issue for a lot of people to think through morally. Then again, there's a lot of parts of the Bible that talk about how life begins with breath. And so even that is something that we can interpret differently. And
I'm pro-choice.
Take up, me too.
Yeah.
But I think no matter where you think about the kind of cosmic question of how life begins, most Americans can get on the board with the idea of, all right, I might draw the line here, you might draw the line there. But the most important thing is the person who should be drawing the line is the woman making the decision.
Absolutely. And I think that if you're a man who's against abortion, you haven't gotten the wrong woman pregnant. Like, cheating on your wife. I'm just saying,
My goodness.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we've had some slip-ups.
And
I've had a few.
look, in the same way we've talked about the way that, the white world needs to deal with race, instead of saying that this is just an issue of minorities. Men are going to have to deal with misogyny and women's rights. Like, this is largely a men problem. And so men have to talk about this. Since when should men be dictating what women ought to be able to do? Anyway, my point is, when it comes to the religious stuff.
Old white men are doing that, by the way. I just want to throw that back out there.
Okay, well, yeah, you're not wrong. But coming back to the religion thing, somehow they put a party label on God. And I don't think God belongs to a political party. And whether you're religious or not, you have a choice. And we got to change the way that we think about what it means to talk to voters of faith without going down the road like they have of using faith as a way to order people into living their lives a certain way, which obviously is bad news for my community, but I also think it's just not the right way to go.
You think God cares about politics?
I think God cares about how we treat each other, and one of the biggest parts of how we treat each other is politics. So yeah, I mean, this has political implications. If we're trying to, Lincoln talked about, I think in the Civil War, he's saying that everybody wants to call God onto their side, but we should spend less time praying to get God on my side, more time figuring out if I can get on God's side. And that's how I come at this, that we are taught, and this is true in a lot of moral traditions that are not religious too, right? We're taught that so much depends on how we treat other people in our lives, but also people we've never met. And in the case of generational justice, people we'll never see. are we being fair to them? Are we being good to them? Are we being kind to them? Or are we being selfish? And there's a lot at stake in the political choices we make when it comes to that question.
So if a religious person says to you, I prayed for Donald Trump to win, what would your response to that person be?
I'd spend more energy. If you're going to pray for this president, I would pray for wisdom and judgment on the part of this president, because our lives depend on it. Not so much praying for, I'm just to say, look, I'm from South Bend. I think a lot of folks pray for Notre Dame football to win with mixed results.
Yeah, I pay for my Giants every year, but I pray.
How's it going?
Why y'all wasting God's
I pray
time?
for the Knicks every year. My Knicks get further and further away. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, the funny thing about praying is sometimes we do it in the sense of like telling God what to do. I think it ought to be more a process where we're deciding how we align ourselves, how we tune our own hearts. If we're going to pray for our politics, let's pray for ourselves to walk in a way that is better for humanity on all sides of our politics. And that's not always about papering over our differences or softening our positions.
Mm-hmm.
It's about making sure that we come at this from starting with the question of how do I make life on this earth better for people.
Now, let me ask you a question. If you do get in office, what's the first thing you're going to attack? What's the first thing you're going to do while you're in office? What's your first agenda?
So
Lysol it.
Lysol it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just reversing the bad stuff he's been doing. A lot of which is a stroke of a pen because it's executive orders. But to me, the big three things. I know you said one, and I'm giving you three, but I can't pick one. Climate, we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Democracy, we've talked about, and that's huge because if our democracy is broken, then any other issue we're going to have a hard time dealing with. And then this question of justice, economic justice, racial justice, making sure we're moving in that direction. And there are things you can do on day one, launching legislation, issuing orders, just who you appoint, just who you're putting in charge of stuff, right? We have a Secretary of Education who does not believe in public education. Mm-hmm. We have a person in charge of the EPA who is a coal company lobbyist, obviously not that interested in environmental protection. So one of the things you do on day one is you set up your cabinet, and personnel is policy. I think that stuff needs attention immediately. And then we got to hit the road and reassure other countries around the world that they can actually count on the U.S. before they make all of their plans in a way that just kind of gives up on us and moves on. If you look at the G7, all the grown-ups getting together to deal with climate, there's an empty chair for the U.S. They are moving on without us. And I don't think that's good news for us or for the rest of the world.
I got two more questions. I know you got to go. This was for the people of South Bend, Indiana. A lot of people were upset that you demoted the black police chief and hired a white guy.
Yeah.
And you admitted that you have failed in efforts to remedy the fact that, like, I think 6% of South Bend's police department.
Yeah, big problem. Right.
Yeah, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, so two different issues. Let me take the second one first. So we are struggling to recruit and retain black officers, and it's really important to have a department that reflects the community that we serve. It's gotten harder over time. It was hard to begin with. It's definitely harder post-Ferguson, and the numbers are there for everybody to see, so I've owned the fact that the numbers have been moving in the wrong direction. Now, that's definitely not for lack of caring about it. We're working at it. We're trying all kinds of different things with recruiting, and this is a problem happening everywhere in the country. But I'm not going to bullshit people. It's a problem, and I'm going to own the fact that we're not where we want to be. In terms of the chief, what happened was there was an investigation, a federal criminal investigation into the department, and as a consequence of what I learned in that investigation, I lost my confidence that he was the right person to be my chief. It was really unfortunate because he was the first black chief in the city's history. And as you know, it doesn't fix everything, but that goes a long way when it comes to the black community wondering if they can trust the police. And one of the reasons I asked him to be my police chief to begin with, and we talk about how personnel is policy, is that I felt that he could do a lot of good work when it came to community relationships in policing. But in the end, I didn't have the trust that I needed once this investigation happened. I would have loved if the right person had been black, but it just didn't work out that way. I mean, I also got to find the right person for the job. But look, we've got to have, and there are other areas where we've been able. So, for example, the Oversight Board, which is a group of civilians that I appoint who make the decisions about discipline, is a very strong minority. It's actually a black majority on that board right now. So that's really important to us. But I also got to have somebody in each job that I think is the right person. And if you're, especially if you're recruiting from within the department, it's one of the reasons why we need a diverse rank and file, because then it gives us more options. down the road, years later, when we're looking at promotions and eventually looking at who's leading the department too.
Got you. And listen, I want to play the second part of the Kevin Hart clip for you.
Okay.
Because he explained why he was, I guess, quote, he didn't care. Can you play that?
In no way, shape, or form should you ever have to defend. But guys, this is what I am. That's not it. It's guys, this is what I'm going to do. My reason for doing this because I know I do this well. When you have a voice and you simply say this, there is no back and forth about what this is. Nothing else needs to be said.
That's a fact.
So when all of that gets started about, but he's not, but they said, you now don't give a because your sentence has been written.
Word.
No explanations.
What do you think of that? Or did it not make any sense to you?
I don't think I get it.
Sounds out of context if you don't hear the whole thing.
He's basically saying once you say you're gay, that should be it.
Oh, I
Like
see.
you said, you shouldn't be labeled the gay rapper, gay country artist, whatever it is you are. You said it, it's done, that's it.
Then isn't he? I don't know. Isn't he then saying like, I don't want to talk about it anymore? You should be able to talk about all kinds of things, and not let it define you, but also not kind of shove it in the corner. It still feels to me like he's got some work to do in terms of his level of comfort with this. But I don't know. Maybe I'll have a chance to talk to him about it sometime.
That would be good. Maybe a conversation between you and Kev would be good.
I'll be up for that.
Yeah. Popeye's chicken sandwich. You had it yet?
Say again?
Did you have the Popeye's chicken sandwich?
No, not in a while.
No, the new one.
No, what is it?
Oh, you haven't had it?
No,
I know
most
you
of my
said you
meals
like
are
Chick-fil-A. That's why I asked you. Like
most of my meals are in vehicles. No, what's special about it? Like different kind of sauce?
I haven't had it yet, but it's driving people crazy all over social
Yeah?
media.
All right,
Yeah.
I'll try it.
You haven't seen it?
No.
I'm sure your team has seen the Popeye's
Yeah,
chicken
why wasn't I
sandwich,
briefed
right?
on this?
He said, why was that everything that's going on in the world? Why did I
I'm
know
just
about the
saying
Popeye's chicken sandwich?
it was all over social media. I know you like
My
Chick-fil-A.
goodness.
I just want to know.
Somebody's getting fired today.
I'm still trying to come to terms with chicken fries from Burger King, so I'm a little behind the curve on
Chicken
on
fries.
that.
That's been out
But,
for
you remember when they
years.
came out with that?
You,
I know it was a
yes.
while ago, but like I'm just saying, like it takes me a while to catch up on the chicken front.
My
sometimes,
goodness.
but I'll try it.
My guy, Mayor Pete, man.
Thank you, Mayor Pete, for
Thank you
joining
for
us.
coming,
Thank you.
man. Appreciate you. Give me your campaign info so they can.
Yeah,
donate and all that good stuff.
PeteForAmerica.com. Follow me at Pete Buttigieg, or what's the new Twitter head? We have a Pete for America one too for the campaign. Text Pete to 25859, and look for me to come somewhere near you sometime soon.
Absolutely.
And if you see him in the street, buy him a Popeye's chicken sandwich.
Sounds
All
good.
right. It's the Breakfast Club. It's Man Pete.